Well, hello, this is the 8th of February 2021, and this, as you can see, is yet another Autie Thoughty. And today I am going to talk about what it is like being an autistic parent of either neurotypical or autistic children. I will include some other people's opinions in this that I have read on various support groups and things online. But I find there is not a lot in terms of, interesting articles and research and stuff about, what autistic people are like as parents. I'll just add a little disclaimer before I start. This is not in any way intended to persuade or dissuade anyone from having children. I've just got some, some information and some feelings I think might be interesting, relatable, useful, whatever, to somebody else possibly. I do notice, time and time again on a lot of my groups for, people who are late diagnosed, people say that they first learned about autism, first realised that it might apply to them when their children were identified. Usually when the kids are quite small, maybe preschool age generally, and they start researching what does this actually mean, how will it affect my child's life, how do I deal with this child, how do I educate them, how do I discipline them, how do I spend time with them, how do we find things we both enjoy, and from that, from this reading and studying, that's when they start to put things together and think, actually, I relate to this much more than to any kind of holistic orientated parenting manual I've ever read. And they sort of come to the conclusion that they are actually autistic themselves. And I've seen a lot of people say that. And another thing that seems to come up time and time again is parents saying that they are a sensory avoidant autistic. They dislike noise and touch. But their children are sensory seeking autistics, and they make a lot of noise and they want to be sort of cuddled and given physical affection quite a lot, and they find that very difficult to deal with. There's a big conflict there, and I do wonder, is it just coincidence? That happened to me. I've talked to a lot of sensory avoidant autistic parents with seeking children. Could be possible. I mean, it's not a great sampling method, people I have met online. Could just be that people with that particular problem tend to go online and talk about it in their support groups, It wouldn't really be an issue if their children were also avoidant or if they were also seeking. I wondered as well, is it that, because they are avoidant, they see their children's sort of perfectly standard noisy play and need for physical reassurance to be sensory seeking behaviour, because it seems to them very intense and difficult to deal with? Or is it that parenting methods 30 or so years ago were more focused on making things easy for the parent, and so the children are kind of expected to be seen and not heard, and it made them more avoidant? Whereas now parenting methods are focused more on developing the child's personality, and giving them freedom of expression, and that sort of leads to more, sensory seeking children. Maybe it's a psychological thing like that. I don't know. I don't know how much that kind of thing is affected by popular discipline methods and sort of received wisdom about what you should do with your children. It's possible, it'd be interesting to see some research on that. It's just a theory of mine. Or could it possibly be that, most of us are more sort of noisy and touchy-feely when we're kids, and then we grow out of it as we get older? Is that likely? I don't know. I don't remember being a particularly sort of physically demonstrative child. I certainly wasn't into noise and crowds and such. But, my mum does say that when I was a baby, before I can remember, I was quite clingy. I don't know how typical that is. I mean, I've talked to a few people, but again, it's not really a scientific method. I'm just one person, talking to strangers in chat rooms and telling you about it. I do find that, my son, as far as I'm aware, is autistic. I have no reason to think he has any particular autistic traits. I do find that one of the difficulties I have as an autistic person trying to parent an autistic child is that I really don't know what autistic children find interesting. I find that my automatic response when I'm trying to get him interested in something, or show him something that might be of educational value perhaps, is to think of what I would have wanted at that age. He's 3 now, my son, which is about I can clearly remember being 3 years old. I can remember quite a lot from being 2, which it is sort of an autistic thing to have a very long memory, but it's one of those things that can go either way. Some of us have very short memories. I've talked to some people who say, well, I can't remember anything before I was about 10 years old. What, 10? But yeah, when I say I can clearly remember a lot of things from being 2 or 3 years old, that's something that holistics find very surprising, sometimes impressive. Sometimes they don't believe it. Sometimes they say, oh, you've just seen a photo and you think you can remember it. No, I can clearly remember all these things that happened to me when I was 2, 3 years old. And I was actually very surprised when I started to notice that other people could not remember things from being a toddler. Most people's memories seem to start around 5, 6, 7 years old. But yeah, he is an age that I can clearly remember being. And I remember what I found interesting then and what I wanted to do. And it's just sort of natural for me to say, oh, look, it's snowing. Wow, look at the snowflakes coming down. And think he'll be as fascinated in that as I was. Oh, look at those lovely leaves moving on the trees. If we go for a walk in the woods or something, he's not bothered. His main interest is vehicles, anything with wheels, really. And it sort of goes through phases of being more into diggers or more into cars or more into trucks or whatever. But it is sort of constant throughout his life so far has been that he's very interested in vehicles, which is one of the things that I personally have never been interested in, particularly. I did have a bit of a thing for number plates when I was about 8 or 9. But yeah, vehicles in general, meh. And do find that sort of quite difficult to get into his world, because I like looking at nature things and animals, and I'd love to just sit and stare at things for ages and watch things move, watch things happen, and that's really not something that he can do. And also at his age, I could read. I mean, not read well, but I had a good understanding of letters and sounds and things. But he's not interested in reading at all. I mean, occasionally he'll sort of point to some words and say, "What does that say?" Or he likes having books read to him, but he's not making any effort at all to read for himself. And that is something that, again, I find hard to understand. I wouldn't say it's difficult to deal with exactly, but I just can't sort of get into that mindset. I do find, it's sort of a separation between us. I suppose because maybe I do worry. And I'm not sure that this really is a problem that we have, but it's something that worries me. Because I'm not particularly social. I do have friends, and a lot of those friends have, kids my son's age. It does worry me that maybe I don't, set a good example of how to socialise with other people, how to talk to strangers. I mean, it's something that I'm a lot better at now than I used to be. I mean, partly because I am a parent, I automatically share a special interest with most of the adult population. You start talking about your child, and a lot of people will instantly join in, telling you about, if not their children, then their nephews and nieces, or their grandchildren, or whoever they have in their lives. Sharing stories and sharing, facts and information and things, and I find that really interesting. I didn't used to be bothered about children before I had my own, but yeah, I am interested in, listening to other people's stories about their children. It has become, I don't know if it is a spin for me, because it's a natural thing once you have a child to, be sort of very involved with, child development and how it applies to you and your own offspring, of course. It is something that other people do understand. If you have a child who just wants to talk about them all the time, it's something that, no one's going to think that that's really odd and creepy. They want to talk about their children as well. Quite often they sort of want to meet up and say, "Oh, let's get our kids to play together sometime." Well, they did before lockdown anyway. I mean, it's a shared experience now that your child doesn't get a lot of play dates. But yeah, I do worry that, me being a bit of a loner does maybe impact him and his social development. And my mum, she has sort of mentioned things that, she thinks might be sort of signs that he is one of us. He eats all his dinner separate. Have you noticed that? He eats his pasta and then he eats his meat and then he eats his veg. Or puts his toys in a line. Things. And again, I don't know if these are just things that all toddlers do. I don't know if they are things that he has picked up from me. I mean, he might be on the spectrum. I don't know. I don't really see any sort of conclusive evidence that he is. But yeah, she just sort of point out these things occasionally. He does this, he does that. And again, it does sort of make it a little bit more difficult, for me to deduce whether he is neurotypical. the fact that I am an autistic person myself, so I can't really, look back on my childhood and say, yes, I always did that. I know what it means, I've got to say, I do find that, the noise and mess and sort of need to be constantly alert is a bit difficult to deal with, as someone who sort of has a low tolerance for those sort of things. But also, I think, my autistic nature, my particular cocktail of traits, does mean that I am consistent. I am good at, doing things right, sort of making rules and sticking to them, keeping my child in routines, doing things like, making sure he gets dressed and has food and things like that every day. These are all things that are part of the autistic psyche. Maybe more than the neurotypical parent necessarily would. I don't think neurotypical parents feed their children. I'm sure they do. I don't know that, they are kind of always prepared in the way that we are. I actually find it quite hard to imagine what it would be like to be an holistic parent. How would that feel? What aspects of parenting would you be particularly good or bad at? I mean, of course, there's as much variation amongst holistics as there is amongst autistics. Some are very good parents, some are very bad parents, but most of them fall somewhere in the middle. The human race survives. And I think one of the things that, and I mean, this is true for me, I don't know about anybody else. One of the things that, I find very interesting and rewarding about being a parent is these little pings of memory you get. Things that I thought I completely forgot all about, and then it comes back to me because I see my own son doing it. Because he's my child, I do things to him like, wipe his face with a dishcloth. And just as I was doing that, wiping his mouth with a dishcloth, it just reminded me of when I was 3 years old and having my mouth wiped with a dishcloth. And just the smell and the taste and the texture of it and the feeling of it rubbing on my face. And I just got this really strong, almost like travelling back in time, just for a moment. Just right back to being a little toddler in my nan's kitchen having my face wiped. Yeah, and trying to get his coat on. Just sometimes, I'm putting his little arms in the coat now. I remember having my arms put in a coat, and picking him up, and his feet leave the floor. And I remember, when someone tried to pick me up and my feet coming off the floor, and the hands tight around my waist, and being sort of picked up and held. And at the moment, my son is very into Ghostbusters, and it wasn't something that I was particularly bothered about as a kid. I remember sort of watching a few episodes of the cartoon and being entertained by it, but I mean, it wasn't a big fandom or anything. because it's been a sort of cultural thing all my life, you know, just part of the background hum of, you know, things that kids are into, I suppose. I mean, it sort of died down a bit, didn't it, in the late 90s, and then it was sort of revived again when they made that new one. It was 2016. 2016 they made the new one. Yeah, because it is just really evocative of my own childhood, and yes, as I say, I didn't really know the characters that well. I don't think I even saw the whole of the first film, but you know, because he's crazy about it, it just sort of sets things off. And watching the film and seeing sort of fashions and, you know, interior design and hearing music that I remember from, you know, my very early childhood. It's quite an experience. I mean, I was hoping that, you know, as someone who is particularly into children's shows of days gone by, as I am, it'd sort of share that with me. You know, watch these shows that are, you know, designed for preschool children. You know, like, you know, I'm very into Camberwick Green and Button Moon and everything. You know, they've been big spins for me lately. I thought, oh, I can share them with him. You know, he'll enjoy them. And he doesn't necessarily. He finds things of his own. And sometimes I enjoy them with him. You know, I've been sort of on this Ghostbusters journey with him almost. I mean, it hasn't become a big spin for me as such, but you know, I've sort of enjoyed it. You know, a lot more than, you know, most parents. When the kids are really into one show, they think, oh God, not that again. Oh no, not Paw Patrol again. I can't stand Paw Patrol. I mean, he doesn't like Paw Patrol, but I don't know. It's sort of all right. I think I hate it less than I thought I would. Let's say, but yeah, and because Ghostbusters is sort of something that's a classic now, and it is something that's sort of as much for adults as it is for children. It's one of those sort of weird crossover fandoms for people of all ages. I think it does. It does become a sort of vicarious spin for me, and this is something that I've only really experienced since having a child. You know, anything that he is very into, that I wasn't interested in before, I find that it suddenly becomes a sort of semi-spin for me. Like when I was very into diggers, you know, I'd never particularly looked at a digger before, but knowing that he's interested in them, it sort of made me see them as an interesting thing as well. And you know, he wanted to learn about what all the bits were called and how it worked and things. And I started sort of looking up, you know, what you call all the bits of a digger, and you know, all the rams and booms and everything. And he wanted to read picture books that had diggers in them, and I was turning the pages and looking at all the different kinds of diggers, you know. And I found it interesting myself because, you know, this little guy was so enthusiastic about it all. And, you know, so I was trying to see it through his eyes and seeing why a digger is a fascinating object. And it worked, you know. I learnt a lot about diggers. And then he was very into Bob the Builder at one bit, which had just completely passed me by. It was on when I was a teenager, you know. I didn't particularly notice it at all. I mean, there was a lot of merchandise about, but I wasn't interested. And then my husband just came home from Poundland one day with a DVD of Bob the Builder and said, oh, well, let's show him this. And he loved it. And I think because he loved it, because he was really interested in it, because he was chatting about it and wanted to buy all the toys and things, now I became interested in it as well. I mean, not quite to the level he was, but I did really enjoy Bob the Builder. Yeah, ask me a question about Bob the Builder. I have found, because he's looking at his picture books and watching kids' TV and things, I do sort of find myself more interested in I wouldn't say fashion, current shows, current books, characters, and things. I mean, I do find that that there is a lot going on at the moment that is very interesting. And it's high quality. That otherwise would have passed me by. I enjoy teaching him things. Sometimes, as I say, he's not always interested in things that I assume he will be interested in. But when we do get some sort of connection, when we do both have an interest in the same thing, that is sort of quite magical, and I can sort of pass on some of my knowledge, which now, as I'm sure you're aware, is quite a big thing for people like us who have often been told to control our enthusiasm. I mean, there is some suggestion that autistic people struggle more than allistic people with things like pregnancy symptoms. I certainly had really bad morning sickness most of the way through. But other than that, I was pretty okay. Birth was, it was unpleasant, but it happened. It was nothing out of the ordinary. Breastfeeding I found a sensory nightmare. But then a lot of allistic people do as well. I don't know that is necessarily true. And I know plenty of autistic people who have had, reasonably standard birth experiences. There's also sort of research suggesting that we have a worse time of it with things like puberty and the menopause. Again, I think it's probably just down to change aversion and sort of pain sensitivity that doesn't necessarily match what the textbooks say it should be. The textbooks that are by, for, and about allistic people. That's what I mean. We maybe get symptoms or experience symptoms in a different way to what is considered normal. But I don't think that necessarily means that we shouldn't have children any more than we shouldn't grow up or become old. The fact that there are autistic people around today means that autistic people have been breeding since the dawn of time, and plenty of us are still doing it and being absolutely fine. I think parenting is one of those things that it is different for everybody anyway. There's such a huge range of experience. And of course, no two children are alike either. It's always going to be difficult, whatever your neurotype. is also always going to be, you know, a really rewarding experience in other ways. I think it's something that, you know, as with so many other things, you just have to take as it comes. You cannot choose your child, you cannot choose your parent. And, you know, it's you know, something you sign up for when you choose to have a child, is that, you know, you're going to have to relate to this little person and care for them and love them, whatever they are. I'm going to stop there. If you have any comments, any stories you wish to share, please pop them in the comments. I've been rambling half an hour now, so I think that's enough from me. And I'll see you in the next one.